Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson. Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson. Barber.
Here.
Chambliss.
Here.
Cumming.
Here.
Ferguson. Ferguson. Fredson.
Here.
Gonzalez.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
G.
Here.
Lilligren.
Here.
Lindstrom.
Here.
Muse.
Here.
Sterner.
Here.
Vento.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Zarin.
Here.
Cherzelli.
Here. Which brings us to the agenda. And unless somebody wants to make an amendment or has any questions, I will assume the approval of the agenda. We have an exciting couple of presentations, and it's been really not a quiet week for Met Council. And I'm really excited about this Excel partnership that we're going to hear about. But first, on to approval of minutes. Is there a motion to, and a second for the approval of the minutes from September 2nd?
Second. Oh, I'm sorry. Second. Thank you.
Right. Motion. Any discussion? Corrections? If not, Bridget, call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson. Atlas Ingebretson.
Mr.
Barber?
Chair, Councilmember Chambliss was trying to get your attention.
I see.
I couldn't
Okay,
get it
sorry.
either. That's okay.
Thank you.
I would like to amend the minutes, changing it from that we would be removing a subset of the data, specifically the areas of concentrated poverty, to unfiltering the data that the Metropolitan provides, so that it's not filtered by ACP 50s.
Mr. Chair,
Thank
Johnson would second.
Great. Okay. And if it's Bridget, we will go back and we're going to vote on. Let's see. I think we need to vote on the amendment. Is that clear? And any discussion on that amendment? Okay, Bridget, why don't you call the roll? And thank you, Reva, for bringing that up. I know I was tracking some of the emails regarding some of that discussion, and I appreciate your staying on that to help clarify that that data still has relevance.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Bridget. Sorry.
Yeah. Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson. Atlas Ingebretson. Barber.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cumming.
Aye.
Ferguson. Ferguson. Fred.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee. Lilligren. Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Muse.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Vento. Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Zarin.
Aye.
Cherzelli.
Aye. And I believe that was a vote on the amendment. So just to make sure we're following every rule of Roberts, let's vote if on the actual motion that was and seconded for the approval of the minutes now as amended. Richard?
Atlas Ingebrigtsen. Atlas Ingebrigtsen. Barber.
Aye.
Chandler.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson. Ferguson. Judson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Muse.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Zarin.
Aye.
Strzelli.
Aye. Well, thanks everyone. And now on to the information items. And I just mentioned it briefly, but we, in a very timely way, have this tremendous opportunity to partner with Excel. And I will certainly let Carrie Desmond really explain both the history and what the opportunity is before us. This is not an action, but it is a kind of a real-time update of something that has come before the PUC even this week, and it's out for public comment. But we want to make sure every council member understands what the opportunity is for us and fitting a number of our goals, climate especially. So, Carrie, with that, I think you're in the room. Take it away.
Thank you, Chair Zelli. Do I share my screen for the presentation, or is Bridget or Greg doing that? Looks like Greg's doing that. Thank you, Greg. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carrie Desmond. I'm a principal engineer in the Engineering and Facilities Department at Metro Transit. And today I'm going to give an update on the Green Energy Partnership with Xcel Energy. And as Chair Zelli alluded, an exciting opportunity we have before us. Next slide. Thank you. So to start, a little bit of history on the partnership. In 2018, the council entered into what we refer to as the Green Energy Partnership with Xcel Energy. And two of the primary goals that were outlaid in that partnership were working towards 60% renewable energy for all council sites by 2030 and 100% by 2040. So having all of our energy coming from the grid from clean sources. A few initiatives that we've done since then under this partnership is we joined with Xcel Energy as part of their electric vehicle pilot to bring the infrastructure to fruition for the C line. So traditionally, the utility would stop at the property line, but as part of the C line VRT implementation and our electric bus pilot, Xcel actually procured and did the construction work for much of the infrastructure to bring the power to the chargers. Next slide, please. So the specific opportunity today relates to the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission Docket 2492, which is specific to COVID-19 relief and recovery. In late May, Commissioner Sullivan with the PUC posed to the rest of the commissioners a desire to explore opportunities for relief and recovery that the regulated utilities in the state of Minnesota could lead. So as part of that, in June, Xcel Energy and all of their peers submitted project ideas to the PUC. And one of the things Xcel proposed was spending up to $100 million of Xcel funds for bus electrification. That's for transit agencies as well as school bus districts. And yesterday they submitted an updated filing with more detail of how that specific program and others that they're proposing could be framed. And so with that, Metro Transit's exploring how we can work together on this opportunity. And the exciting part of it is Excel has proposed to the PUC to earmark 65 million of those funds specifically for Metro Transit bus electrification. And then the remaining 35 million, other transit agencies in the state, as well as school bus districts and Metro Transit on a first come, first served basis would be eligible for. So right now, this is in front of the PUC for consideration. It's also open for a public comment period through mid-October. And then it could be as soon as late this year or early next year that the PUC renders a decision on approving projects like this one. Next slide. So as part of discussions with Excel for this opportunity in particular, we've outlined a number of goals and objectives of what we would be trying to achieve. So the first one being COVID-19 economic relief and recovery. That's really what brought this stimulus opportunity to the table. Reducing our environmental impact in our communities, and then really looking at the technical viability of the buses and the chargers. So as I think most are aware, the first year of operations with our electric bus pilot has not been without its challenges, and particularly related to the reliability of the charging technology. And then the final one we looked at was fiscal responsibility and sustainability. So recognizing the current climate we're in, the challenges we face, making sure not only we can address the capital costs up front, but also that we can sustainably operate this technology into the future if this opportunity comes to fruition. And this aligns very well with our Thrive 2040 goals as well. Really, every one of our goals ties in very nicely to this opportunity. Next slide. So what we've outlined with Excel at this stage is a vision of if this opportunity is approved by the PUC, how Metro Transit could take advantage of this funding. It's not a specific promise, as I outlined previously. The technology has to be ready to make sure we can make service every day and that we can do this in a aggressive and bold way, but still do it responsibly. I think one of the exciting parts is this funding would allow us to largely cover the incremental cost between diesel propulsion and electric for both the costs associated with the vehicle, but also the charging infrastructure. So we've talked about using it towards bus purchases, charging purchases, and infrastructure, as well as what's referred to as smart charging in the industry, which is a software platform that helps us stabilize our charging operations and have stable utility bill costs. And so with that, the filing that went in yesterday proposes a sliding scale of rebates or credits towards purchases. And so that $65 million earmark for Metro Transit would be dispersed in $1 million increments for every bus that's purchased. And then we could use that funding towards any of the eligible costs I just went over. Next slide. So with that, specific to the economic relief and recovery aspects, referring to research from the American Public Transportation Association, we feel an investment on the order of $100 million could generate over 5,000 jobs when you talk about manufacturing, all of the construction work, and actually operating and maintaining this equipment. And all of this would be done in accordance with council policies and in particular our MCUB program. Next slide. So in terms of what comes next, yesterday was kind of the detailed filing. So the best analogy to make for that is it would be analogous to a grant application being submitted. It was submitted by Excel Energy. Right now, the filing's open for public comment through October 16th. We're working on a letter of support. I think this time it's believed it would be co-signed by Chair Zelli and General Manager Koistra, but there's of course room for all of the council members to express their interest, enthusiasm, and support for this initiative. So with that, I'll turn it back to Chair Zelli and take any questions.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, let's open it up to questions. I have to say, this is really kind of continues a partnership we've had with Excel, and they've been very supportive. And when you look around the country of utilities, we're very fortunate in Minnesota to have not just Excel, but a number of our power companies are really engaged in advancing alternatives to fossil fuels. So it's and I think transportation is 1/3 of the emissions for carbon. And given our leading role as the major transit operation in the state, it's really kind of a way to, I think, so to speak, supercharge this effort. And I think this is a rare opportunity because we can actually get our bus replacement that we're going to do anyway, but actually without the increased cost, which is really what this is covering. And I think that this doesn't just come out of the blue. It really is a great testimony to the staff and to our engagement and learning along the way with the C line, which has not been a straight line. This has been complicated bringing this kind of technology in. But I do know, being a bus guy as I am, that this is far more advanced in Europe than it is in the United States. And there are other jurisdictions in the United States that are looking at doing this work, but I think we could be one of the leaders in this country by advancing this work. So I'm really just think it's thrilled for Metro Transit and for what we're doing as a council, given that our goal isn't just to move people, it's to actually move people in a clean way and really impacts communities, and not just climate, but think about some of the air quality along some of our transit routes, which has been an issue we've been hearing about. So let's open it up. Any comments, thoughts, questions? And just Chris, I see you there raising your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just wanted to join the praise of the Met Council for pursuing this, and obviously to the utilities for participating, and the leadership of the administration and the commissioners that have been appointed to the PUC for pursuing this. I just, in this crisis where we're facing so many challenges on the jobs front, and especially looking ahead at starting next year, and then considering the climate crisis and ways that we can help tackle that as a Met Council, and then on the environmental justice side. And I can't remember the meeting, it was probably a year ago, but it was an analysis that staff did in terms of our fleet's contribution to pollution across the metro. And I remember those numbers really spiked in Minneapolis. And so one question I would have is as it relates to prioritizing the investment within the region. I'm a St. Paul guy, but I'm interested to know, like, are we going to prioritize communities that are dealing with more pollution from our fleet than others? And then just want to say, ask the question, like, what can we do to help? Would it be helpful as a individual council member to contact the PUC commissioners, or do we just weigh in sort of here as a Met Council?
Thank you, Chris. And I will jump in to say that as a council, we can definitely give comments, which I think we should do, to the PUC in support. But the question about individual, that's a good question. Anyway, Carrie, or maybe there's others here who could answer that from the staff. Particularly where we would actually route these buses, are they the areas that are maybe most affected by air quality?
Maybe I'll take a shot at it, and Terry can support me or correct me as necessary. This is Wes. And Councilmember Fretzen, I think you're right. This gives us really a lot of opportunity to do a lot of things. And I'm just going to echo the excitement that we have for this project. And it's really a jumping up and down thing. And I don't want to do that until the PUC approves it. So I'm holding myself back, but this is just coming at the right time and the right moment for us when we have this strong commitment towards electric bus, but at the same time we have these financial challenges that we need to get through, and this bridges the challenges that we have. So that we can maintain that commitment to electric bus, not only in the way that we imagined it, but also even a further commitment than we perhaps had imagined. Because right now our plan is to look at the possibility of all replacement buses coming in electric, and I want to echo Terry's hedge, because the technology has to work for that. In the end, we have to provide services on the street. To your specific question about where these buses will be located, we have the large buses on the C line right now, and we're anxious to apply this technology to our 40-foot bus purchases, which gives us an opportunity to try those buses on more of the local routes within the city, and where areas where perhaps we have the greatest impact on air quality, and so that's our hope. Again, I think we have a 5-year framed proposal that includes both charging infrastructure in our garages, but also charging infrastructure online, and so we're working with our service planning staff and so forth to see how we can best position this to do exactly those things that you're suggesting.
Thank you.
You're muted, Charlie.
It's just thank you, Molly. This is Molly's job, is to kind of make sure I'm speaking out loud. Before I call on Molly, I was just going to say that Wes, hats off to you and your team, because this is engineering, but it's a lot of it is operations and how we're going to manage not just new fleets and where they run, but the whole charging infrastructure, the smart metering it's going to take to make sure that we're actually being efficient. And I know, and I've learned, it's one thing to charge my little car, but when you're charging a big bus, that's a lot of power. And so this is not a simple undertaking when you think about what we're marching into. Molly, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First comment, of course, this is really exciting opportunity. And, I was thinking about this, and as much as the electrification of the buses on the C line was not without some challenges, we partner with New Flyer. I think they came through as strong partners, and it really wound up being almost R&D for electronic buses, and gave us kind of a run up to things that we would need to be considering. Obviously, it's different, but I think Carrie mentioned that you have to be sort of ready and bold and aggressive and ready to go. So I think that part of it really may have worked for who knew it, but to our benefit if this comes through. And then if you can clarify for me, and Wes, I'm not sure, you mentioned the 5 years. If we, in fact, do get this, does the money have to be spent within a certain period of time? Or, because you said, Carrie, that it would be doled out in $1 million increments. I'm just wondering if there is a particular period of time by which it has to be spent.
I'll let Carrie expound on this, but my understanding is that we have to have the money encumbered within the 5-year period of time.
That's correct. And I think something that speaks very profoundly to our partnership with Excel is when they approached us with this opportunity, they asked us, how does this need to be set up so that we can deliver on it successfully together? And so they've been very good partners, and not so much coming to us with terms so much as asking us, how does this need to work to be successful together? And so General Manager Koistra is exactly correct. We have to encumber it within the 5-year period, but then there's time afterwards to continue paying invoices, closing out projects, et cetera. Because as we've all learned with C-Line, doesn't always wrap up as quickly as you may have hoped.
Well, and there also is a question, is there an electrician in the house? Councilmember Zeron, you had a question, maybe a comment.
Yes, I do have a question. This is very exciting to me. I really looking forward to this. This makes a lot of sense to me for our bottom line, and as well as creating some relief from COVID and getting jobs back on the line. It really makes sense to me. I'm really excited about it. My question is, and I will weigh in at the PUC, and they'll hear from me. That I'm sure they're waiting. But my question is around, okay, so we got $65 million that's going to be earmarked upon approval for Metro Transit for electrification. And then we've got another $35 million to potentially others. That must be like a solicitation process where they've identified a line where they, say a school bus company or another transit provider would identify that and go about getting the funds for buying that electric bus or building some infrastructure. But if those funds aren't used, what's the likelihood then that Metro Transit would be able to find a use for those within that 5-year period? I'm assuming that if nobody comes forward with a plan within a few years, that that funding would be available for Metro Transit and Council to electrify.
Chair Zelli?
Yeah, go ahead, Wes.
I will say to Carrie's, on Carrie's behalf that she put together a team that put together a framework for a plan that would actually use all $100 million. So we of course would like to have an opportunity as much as we can, and I would echo the thanks to Excel for their partnership in this. They have guaranteeing us $65 million if it's approved by the PUC. I have to keep saying that because I don't want to get don't want us to get ahead of ourselves. But if it's approved, guaranteeing $65 million is a pretty nice guarantee, and telling us that we can compete for the other $35 million is also a nice opportunity, and we'll be ready to do that. Again, given that the technology is ready for what we're ready for. We also, by the way, because we've told Excel we want to be part of the community, and we've also offered our consultation as we learn more to others that receive the grant. So not only do we certainly we would like to have as much of the resources possible, but to the extent that others have resources and they can benefit from our experience, we've offered to them that we would certainly share our experience with others and provide consultation with others, because all this money is going to be put to good use, and no matter who the recipient is. But we do have a plan an aggressive plan that would encumber the entire amount if they can't find any other takers.
Great. Don't tell any other bus company. I know Deb Barber, you had a question.
Just a comment. I'm excited about this opportunity under the prior council, really in response to a number of comments we had to an update of the transportation policy plan. We built the fleet electrification plan. I was given our current financial situation and where things have been going, I was very concerned of our ability to stay on pace with what was the desire. And it certainly had been reiterated by this current council to keep proceeding along that pathway. So I'm really excited that we might have this opportunity because we have learned a lot. We've got an exceptional partnership with Excel, and we've been able to work with the Minnesota manufacturer for the buses as well. And so all of that coupled together this could be a really good thing for the state and for the region. So I'm really excited to hear about the opportunity and happy to do anything I can to help.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I can't see everybody, but
Councilmember Lindstrom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Mr.
Robert.
Chair.
Or Peter, I mean.
Yes. Thanks, Mr. Chair. A couple of things. First of all, I think it was just mentioned, but those 5,500 jobs, it's a very good chance that those will be Minnesota jobs. Understanding that buses are manufactured in greater Minnesota, which is fantastic to hear. And I guess my question is, you're either Carrie or Wes, you're likely familiar with the VW settlement funds. We're now in phase 2 of those settlement funds, which a good chunk of those is allocated for electric vehicle school buses and transit buses. And it's not, I mean, it's not tens of millions of dollars for those things, but it's a few $1 million. And I'm wondering if we had already had plans to apply for those VW settlement funds, or if we're tracking that, or considering applying for those funds, just to leverage, hopefully, the 65 million or more that we will get through this partnership.
Mr. Chair, I think maybe Carrie has that information. My recollection was there were certain criteria that were difficult for us to squeeze through. So, but I'll let Carrie respond to that.
I know we've tracked it. I haven't personally been involved in it, so I actually don't know a lot of the specifics, Wes, but last I heard was similar to your comments, that we either weren't eligible or it was very hard to meet, very much steered towards school buses, as I understand it.
Thank you. Just another quick comment is that I'm sure there are other groups, nonprofits in the Twin Cities in particular, that would be interested in this. They're probably already tracking every docket that comes before the PUC, so it may not be a surprise to them, but ensuring that groups like Great Plains Institute and Fresh Energy are aware of this, are aware of our support, unanimous support most likely amongst this council. It wouldn't be the worst thing to connect with them.
Todd, thank you. Other comments, questions?
Mr. Chair?
Robert.
Yeah, thanks. And let me just add my voice to the chorus of support and excitement about this opportunity. It's huge. I really look forward to the reduction of emissions, especially on communities that are most disproportionate. Question of the Green Energy Partnership and the 2030 goal of the 60% reduction, or the 60% rather, renewables. And I'm just wondering if we have any idea at this point, or if there's been any analysis on how much an investment like this would move us.
Yeah, Carrie, do you have that fleet chart that shows kind of how far we get in the first 5 years?
I don't have that in front of me, Chair Zelli, but what I could clarify is that Green Energy Partnership, as I understand it, is Excel committing that the energy they provide to us is coming from renewable sources. So not only are we providing, reduced emissions through our fleet, but then the electricity that we're actually using to charge those buses is coming from wind power, solar, and sources like that, as opposed to a coal-fired plant.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Clean electricity. But that's a good point to consider, the point source of the power and how we use the power, and what we use is both. And also keep in mind our light rail and our expanded light rail lines, those are all electric. So when you think about how we move people, if they are coming from clean sources of electricity, it really is kind of a double whammy.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Wes.
I thought I would also mention that this ties in with some other activities we have that probably, again, Carrie's a better representative than I am. But, we're building the new Minneapolis garage that's going to have features. We have a NOLO grant that will allow us to put solar on that. We're working with Excel on bridging the gap in fuel costs between electric and and diesel, which during the pandemic, it's just the diesel costs have gone way down. So they're interested in helping us with that. And so we're trying to tie this to other activities that we have going and to expand other work that we have going with Excel as well. It's not just this, it's other things. So there's a lot of fronts that we're working on the climate sustainability issues within our own infrastructure at Metro Transit and in that partnership with Excel.
Really great to point out that this isn't just a capital purchase. This is an ongoing operating shift, and with that, not easily solved. So it takes a lot of eyeballs, and engineering and operating expertise. So hats off to you, Wes, and your team to take it on. One thing I learned about electric vehicles is in Minnesota, Excel gets quite a bit from wind energy, and wind blows at night, which is very different if you're a state like California, which gets also wind, but quite a bit of solar. So it's nice that we have an abundant wind source for, particularly for electric vehicles that often are charged in the evening. So it's easier to have that sustainable source. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Quick question, Carrie, did you say that this is federal CARES funding that is flowing, or is it just Excel money?
This is Excel funding.
Related
so similar,
to COVID. Okay.
Right. So the PUC tasked the regulated utilities with proposing projects, and Excel actually proposed a $3 billion package overall. A lot of that is advancing clean energy at their production facilities, transitioning more to wind, as Chair Zelli stated, and other things of that nature. So this would be Excel funded.
It's a whole nother presentation where you think about Excel is advancing these alternative energies. It is closing the Becker plants early, in part because they're developing these other sources. So it's, and I agree with you, Peter, we need to stay in touch with Great Plains and with Fresh Energy to kind of think about how getting a spotlight on this initiative in the context of all the other things that are happening in this space. Any questions or thoughts? This won't be the last we're hearing this, but it's an early check-in. Just want to make sure everybody's tracking it. And Carrie, it's great to hear from you and Wes, but it's not lost on us that you have a robust team, including our Metro Transit operations engineers, our fleet people, but also those that are taking on extra assignments to make this happen. So it's really a great testimony to you, and then of course your cohorts at Excel, because it's not just one person there; it's a whole group that is really dedicated to it. So I think they're interested in advancing the technology. We are not. This isn't bleeding edge R&D, but it is a work in process. So we recognize that. Any other comments? Last thoughts? All right, thanks, Carrie, so much. We appreciate hearing this report, and we'll stay tuned, and we'll let everybody know how we can support this. There's no action for us now, but as it is before the PUC and open for public comment, we'll have more to kind of describe as this process goes through its regulatory, the hurdles.
Thank you, Chair Zelli.
Thanks. Okay, so now I think we're going to shift to the Metro Transit Police Review update. Just so everyone knows, you've heard from the Citizens League, we've heard from Wes and from Chief Frizzell, but important to consider that Mary Bogie, who is our acting regional administrator, took on a lot of responsibility, including helping coordinate this police review. So given everything else that's happening and our regional administrator staying on assignment for COVID testing, Michelle Fury has is taking on also additional work by helping do kind of be on the ground coordinating a lot of this activity. So, and I know it's been a question many of us had, which is kind of where do we stand? What's happening next? What's the process going to be? And I think rather than we should be doing this on a regular basis, but just to kind of set up where we are today, what's happening. We just kind of want to open up and hear, even though, you know, we could always wait till everything's done. Well, it's not done. It's very much in process. So it's great that Michelle is here to take us through that presentation, and then we can kind of open up a conversation to have any other questions or thoughts as to what you hear. This is by no means the final calendar, but it is a real-time update as to kind of where we are today. Michelle?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me okay. This is the first time I've been presenting to you all this afternoon in this.
You're loud and clear.
You'll be able to hear me, and if there's anything else I can do to make the presentation more meaningful, you just holler and let me know. Greg, do you have the slides? Great, thank you. So the goal today, as Chair Zelli mentioned, is just to really catch you up on where we are with this project. Fortunately, we are at the very beginning, so it's a great time to connect with all of you to give you a sense of what's coming, how things will evolve, and how we can make sure that we're not only checking back in with you, but making sure that we're being responsive to any considerations you'd like us to have. The folks from the Citizens League who we're partnering with on the engagement aspects of this review could not be here with us today, but we are definitely in close coordination, and they will likely be appearing before you along with me in the future as we move through this project. Go ahead and hit the next slide, Greg. So I wanted to give you a quick status update on where we are with that partnership. Try to give you a sense of what work will be moving concurrently and what work is really dependent upon the engagement that we need to be doing with our key constituencies to make sure that we're doing a really good base of authentic, deep community engagement so we really understand where people are. Give you a sense of the next steps that are coming in the near term, and then discuss any ways that we can, as I mentioned, either connect with you or make sure that we're checking in both with you and any constituencies that you really want us to talk through. And just at the outset, as the chair mentioned, you have heard from the chief recently about some of the things that he's working to implement around 21st century policing processes. So that work is going to continue. And the idea here is we want to make sure that we're balancing what is going on with the review process as well as any changes or shifts that he's instituting at the police department, that we can make sure we're supportive of both things as we move forward, and that they're well not only situated, but they're robust in both accounts. Go ahead and move forward, Greg. So the good news is our formal partnership with the Citizens League to manage the engagement pieces is in place. We now have a contract, and that work is beginning in earnest this week. The engagement portion of this work, the review process, will extend from now through the end of May 2021. There will certainly be checkpoints in between, so it's not like you'll hear about it now and you'll hear about it in May, but the intent here is to make sure that we have plenty of time to really go deep with the critical questions that the Citizens League outlined for you several weeks ago. Mainly that we need to understand people's experiences with the Metro Transit Police Department, and we really need to work with community to define what safety and enforcement mean to each unique stakeholder. So those understandings are going to be a long process to some degree, because we have to make sure that we're getting to the full range of constituencies there. And that includes both our customers and our riders, as well as people in community who are interacting with our transit system and our transit facilities. And just to give you a sense of why sometimes these things take time, the Citizens League a process that is intentionally deep in that they're engaging community in the planning and implementation, process, that they're asking how to engage with them before they're actually beginning the engagement. Then they'll begin the engagement and go through the process and bring community along in that. And then at the end, obviously, we check back in with community to make sure that they were engaged in a way that they either expected or that was respectful or that met their expectations. That is a really intentional process that that takes time, and it's wonderful that we're going to have their expertise and resources and relationships to bring to that process. To accomplish that, they're proposing, and they have proposed, and they'll be implementing for us a process that includes a number of different committees, two in particular that they outlined for you a few months ago or a few weeks ago, namely a stakeholder committee that involves folks from the council, staff, yourselves, and potentially others if we've identified those for them, but also a community committee that really provides that feedback about how to ask questions of community, what questions to ask, and where to be engaging with community, frankly. So those two groups will really help set the stage for how the engagement will unfold. And in the near term, that's really going to be the bulk of the work that Marika and Amanda are involved with in terms of setting up those committees and understanding the process for working with them. We'll also be engaging on a regular basis. I'll be managing the project from our side, and then we'll be working with the Citizens League and their partners to make sure that we're all in step with the expectations, and that we're reporting back as appropriate to both you and to other stakeholders. Just a reminder that a part of that community process is to make sure that we are compensating individuals and community for their time and expertise. That's a piece that often gets bypassed in efforts like this, that they're not paid professionals, but they absolutely have value to bring to the conversation. And so there will be a compensation piece. And as I mentioned before, they'll be providing guidance on the best ways to engage constituencies so that we see a successful process. We will be supporting this work as a staff from a number of perspectives. We'll be managing the communications and helping promote, but we'll also be providing data and information that we have from our customer surveys, from interactions that we've had with people on the system, as well as any internal staff feedback that we've had recently. It is, as you know, since the unrest in our communities earlier this summer, we've had a number of internal conversations, and we've heard a lot from our staff about expectations around, how we interact with community from our police department perspective, but also just, organizationally. So this is critical information that we'll be sharing with the Citizens League team to make sure that they understand some of the expectations there as well. Next slide, please. So this slide is intended to illustrate for you that this engagement work will be the critical piece of the review process right now, and that will be paired with some ongoing work that Metro Transit is engaging with, and certainly the transit engagement team generally is out working on projects like Network Next, any of the D-line and B-line developments. So those transit projects where we're still investing in community, that we're out talking to community. We're doing less of that in person these days, but we are actively engaging community around those things. So those will continue concurrently. And as I mentioned before, the chief is working to implement some 21st century policing practices. So those will continue, but as there are relevant questions, they certainly will be part of the engagement that the Citizens League is including. And then of course, as questions come up that need to be integrated into some of the questions that we're asking community, we'll be working closely with Metro Transit and the police department to make sure that happens. So those two things are going to be moving concurrently. And then the larger policy impact questions will come after the engagement. I mean, the idea is that the engagement should really inform any policy discussions that come, that are of significant impact on our customers, on our communities, and on our constituencies. So what we need to do is really understand what that means before we actually bring some of these policy questions forward. And those would obviously be policy questions that you would be engaged with. So the intent here again is to really make sure we are embedding these decisions in the experiences of community and customers and constituencies to make sure that we really understand where the areas for improvement, where we can adjust things are, so that we know how to prioritize those conversations too. So that's our hope, that by the end of this first phase, you'll have a really clear picture of some of the issues at play that you need to weigh, and some really good information from community and from data to make those decisions. Next slide. So the big stuff, as I mentioned before, will be establishing these working committees and then lining up additional resources for the Citizens League partnership, including technology and support for accessibility. A lot of this work is going to be done remotely, so we'll be trying to find the best ways for folks to convene and engage. There certainly won't be only remote interactions, but obviously smaller groups are really all that we can support in an in-person setting. So we'll be refining some of those things together, and then they'll be executing those plans. Just a heads up too, we are providing some translation and interpretation support for this effort, so that we make sure that we're able to reach all of the critical audiences, but also that they're able to participate fully without having to have all of the materials, in some way unclear to them. So we'll be working really closely with community organizations, but we'll also be making sure that we have the materials in the appropriate languages, and that we have assistance for folks if they need it. I will be coordinating communications and engagement across the council, and that includes with Metro Transit. So one of the things that we'll be putting together is a plan that identifies how, when our staff are out engaging, they know how to bring feedback back to this process if they hear from community about this review process, but also when the Citizens League is out, hearing things, that we know that that there's coordination between all of these aspects. And that's complicated, but it's simple to do when you have a really clear plan and when you're communicating with all of the folks. We'll obviously have some working teams internally as well. I also just wanted to note that Marika and Amanda did present to the Equity Advisory Committee last night, and heard some really interesting questions about data, about an asset approach rather than a deficit approach, which is a common need from community. They don't want to just be approached with a deficit mindset. They want to be approached certainly, as the strengths and assets that they bring to the table, and those experiences are going to definitely be included as strengths. And then also they heard some feedback about how some of the policy considerations will be addressed. So I expect that there will be opportunities to bring those issues back to the Equity Advisory Committee as this evolves. There was some interest there. They're having some conversations about having some subcommittees that are more topical, including like a transit subcommittee, for example. So that could be a really great, place to bring some of these conversations for the Equity Advisory Committee to talk through. So there was good conversation, and definitely some support for trying to connect community to this process as we move forward. You can go ahead to the next slide, Greg. So this brings us to our opportunity to talk about things. I don't want to spend too much time talking at you about process, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about some of the things that you think might be important, either some fundamental questions, how you'd like to hear more about this effort as it evolves, the kinds of, would you like some reports that aren't necessarily in person, or would you like us to come back, periodically, either, monthly, bi-monthly, something like that. But it's totally up to you how you want to receive this information. And we're open at this point, since we haven't put too many plans together, to making sure that that is our highest priority as we move forward. So I just want to open up the door and see if there are any critical questions you'd like us to make sure that we're reporting on, or ways that you'd like to hear back about this effort, or other connection points you'd like to see in this process.
Thanks, Michelle. And I will open it up. I know, and actually I encourage people, if you don't see me by waving a hand, you can always go to the chat function. And Councilmember Alice Ingebrigtsen is here and has a question.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks, Michelle, for this presentation. And I deeply appreciate the robust approach around design of engagement and doing engagement prior to us having conversations so that we can take what is considered into account. So I want to say thank you for that approach and acknowledge it. I also want to just say, in the context you asked the question, what are other things to include? We've been having fairly robust conversations around the incidences of and forgive me because I'm not 100% about the language I'm using, but interactions or stops with young people by our transit police. So I know there's a lot of robust information and questions being asked related to that. So I would encourage you to include that information and provide that to the Citizens League and others as that information becomes available. The one question I have is, can we ensure kind of explicitly in our work that in the planning and the outlining of deliverables that we will be engaging directly young people? And then I offer two ideas. One is, because of our unique relationship with Minneapolis Public Schools, I just think it would be really great to honor that experiment, if you will, of having all their high school students on our buses and having an explicit mention of outreach to them specifically. If there are other schools, I think there may be some in St. Paul as well who use our systems. I think that would be one specific target audience to make sure we are including. And then an offer of extension to, in my day job, we coordinate with many youth serving intermediaries. So if there's a desire to engage young people across the metro area and even across the metro area, we have those relationships at Youth Prize, and I'd be happy to aid in an engagement or an event that brings those groups together.
Great. Councilmember, Mr. Chair, thank you so much for that feedback. Just to assure you of the process, we already have in our materials that young people are a critical audience in this process, so it is explicit in pre-existing plans that came from the Citizens League, and as we move forward, we will absolutely identify that as a critical audience. I love this idea about having specific engagement with the school partners that are riding our service every day to get to and from school, at least during normal times, not perhaps during COVID times. But and then it does include Minneapolis Public Schools as well as a number of other customers that I'm aware of that we've engaged in past efforts. So we'll definitely put that on our list. And I also appreciate the offer of access to your relationships through Youth Prize. We'll definitely be plugging in on that. So thanks for those offers, and we'll be following up.
Thanks. Councilmember Lilligren has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. It's actually more of a comment than a question, but Michelle, I really appreciate your being here, putting out this plan very transparently. It's helpful, especially for someone who represents a very high transit using population, and so thank you. And I really support the Equity Advisory Committee's recommendation to take an asset-based approach. And I work in a community that often has a lot of deficits that are kind of upfront in the Native community, and my organization and just kind of who I am is an asset-based operator. And so I know that it's challenging, but I also know that the reframing from a deficit approach to an asset approach has a profound impact on the work that we're doing. So I look forward to seeing the progress there. I just want to first off really lift up what Councilmember Alice Ingebrigtsen said about engaging youth, and that was one of the two groups I had noted that I was going to kind of lift up in this conversation. And I don't think I have ever been to a transit-related event just on the north side that I represent without issues of transit police coming up, and whether that's a planning event or a line opening or whether it is about this conversation. And so just the importance of that, and generally parents who are talking about the treatment of their kids riding the bus and their engagement with the transit police. So just to see, and I know that you know that, and to, you know, for this to be able to see that robust effort to really address that community. And the other is a community, you know, I would bring up the Native community as well, and the, you know, relationships of transit police to the Native community. And I represent the highest concentration of Native people in the country, actually. And so, but also to get specific, and not that all unsheltered people are Native people, but the unsheltered population, I think, needs to be engaged in a deliberate way. And we've seen transit police do some incredibly innovative things through the homeless action team, through the rapport and relationships that were built through what was called in the community the Sabo Camp earlier this summer. And there's something kind of special and different going on there, and the relationship between law enforcement in general and our unsheltered populations, but specifically Metro Transit. I think there's something to kind of be learned there. So that just to maybe lift up that population that is difficult to engage and is under-engaged in general, but then, well, I shouldn't say under-engaged in this kind of a conversation, maybe more engaged in a day-to-day basis. And like Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen, I would be happy to put any relationship support knowledge I have to doing that specific kind of outreach to support your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And since you've mentioned our homeless action team, everybody should know, or maybe does know, they've been nominated for an award in the St. Paul Chamber as for stellar partnership work, and so I think have been so really widely respected for that their efforts, which of course we wish, and as you, Robert, so rightly point out, there's so much more to do. So I know that Wendy has had her hand up, and Judy Johnson after Wendy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was been thinking about how we found out earlier this year that the citations for non-payment of fare, only 3% of the people were actually paying them, and the prosecutors were just ignoring them. I want to make sure that we talk with the police department to find out, are there other things like that? Because we should have known that long before it got down to 3%. That's terrible. Are there other things like that that are dysfunctional outside of Metro Transit that are impacting their ability to do their job? Because when things like that happen, where somebody gets a ticket that nobody actually is going to enforce, it frustrates the community as well. And so we have to look at the whole system. So asking the cops if there are things like that, and also giving them the opportunity to provide feedback anonymously so they can be more open on things, you know, without fear of retribution if they talk about something. I think it's important to have the opportunity to say things anonymously if they would like to. Also, having the bus drivers and the train operators have the opportunity to say if there's things that they see where they would like more support from the cops, less support, you know, things that they think can make things better on the actual buses and trains, I think is an important part of the discussion as well. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll work on making sure that we bring those things up with our staff conversations.
And I appreciate, Michelle, that you had on your list of stakeholders our employees, and specifically the Metro Transit Police employees, who, as I think Councilmember Wall says, are on the front line of a lot of the activity that we have encountered. Judy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to the comments that have already been raised, Robert, for the homeless population. I had that on my list. And Wendy, as well, thanks for the current employees, including the police, already part of the process. Appreciate that. Some of the questions I have too are, will we I'm thinking also more of, you know, the operations, the interactions, those relationships and service delivery, all of that, expectations, outcomes, data-driven, experiential, all of the things we'll be doing. But also, are we going to avail ourselves of other public safety experts from around the region or state? We have some really great public safety leaders, whether they're police chiefs or former police chiefs or you know, high-level commanders that you know, can also just come around and share their own experiences, since, you know, it's a big region and we're evolving. And I know in the Plymouth community, we also do 21st century policing, and I've been engaged in 2 major shifts in how we govern around public safety and policing. And so I want to think, you know, I'm hoping, and because I've been talking about this for about a year now since we appointed Chief Frizzell, you know, I really want to also have at least a bit of governance around this, or the opportunity for the council to look at governance around this and what might be already an excellent structure in place and how it works. But I want to better understand that structure as a council member. I want to better understand reporting. I want to better understand opportunities and challenges from an asset-based mindset. I want to make sure that we're supporting the chief. And while I completely understand that the jurisdiction is over transit, there are, you know, I just need to understand our governance and reporting structure. And if we could talk about that at some point, I'm expecting it from conversations I've had with staff. And recently, I hope that that can be, because I don't want to get to the end of this and, you know, not go high enough level where at least we've taken a look that direction, and maybe nothing needs to change, but this would be for me an opportune time to really look at that. I also am wondering, because of how the corridors are aligned, are we going to engage colleges and universities, which again would encompass a lot of our youth, but our older youth that are riding those lines, or in many cases not riding the lines because they don't feel safe. So colleges and universities, also the healthcare institutions along those lines. I know they have a vested interest in transit and for their workers and their clients. And then to the worker aspect of this, again, because so many businesses are aligned on our transit corridors, you know, I'm hoping that if there could be a way to talk to businesses, and maybe that is via the chambers of commerce, or, you know, you've got Midway, St. Paul, Minneapolis, you've got others that fall all along those lines. But because workforce is so important, maybe that's another way to pick up certainly some of the ridership, but we probably already have ways to connect with them. But I'm trying to think about people who don't take transit, and is public safety an issue for them? Is that even a consideration for them? So how do we tap potential market that might be, you know, why aren't you riding the bus scenario or taking transit? You know, for me, I think this is a lot about racial justice, social justice, and an element of criminal justice. So I want to make sure that we're looking, you know, through those lenses. It seems we just got off of a transportation meeting and we were talking about environmental justice and, you know, all the things that we're working on. So however we can apply those lenses, I would appreciate it. And then I'm just curious, what were slides 4, 5, and 6 in the presentation? Because we went from slide 3 to 7, and I'm sure that you may have condensed things, but I'm just always curious about, is there anything in there that, you know, we should, you know, maybe be interested in, or just wasn't appropriate for this meeting?
Thank you, Councilmember and Mr. Chair. Those 3 slides were originally from the Citizens League presentation, in case you had more questions about deeper into their process. So I just wanted to have those available in case you wanted to see them. But, you know, it's certainly consistent with what I talked about and what you've already talked about. So if anybody has any questions, wants to see those, we can pull them up. That's what
Mr. Chair, just
Thanks
was
for your
curious.
comments.
Yeah, and as far as Citizens League process, they're awesome, right? The best of the best. So this is such I'm so thrilled to be part of this and can't wait for it. But I do want to, again, make sure that those other constituencies are brought into it. You know, public safety is not only art and science, but it's human. And, you know, I think there's some experience outside of our own department that might be valuable resources that I'm sure the chief already has availed himself of, because they have a network to support each other. So thank you.
Great comments, Councilmember Jensen. Thank you. And also, eagle eyes. I did not pick up on that in cases. So just, you know, lesson for staff. You can't get away with just, you know, we're actually going to see it. Any other comments, questions, thoughts? I know that there was a presentation at the Equity Advisory Committee. I heard from Councilmember Chai Lee this morning that that went well. So I'm pleased to hear that we are actually finding ways to engage really an important part of our operation. And I know also I would express for all of us having this a regular check-in, even though we're in process, is kind of helpful. I think for us to kind of have confidence that we're moving forward, and getting these real-time comments as we do it is really helpful now, because particularly about constituencies that we should be considering and talking to. There are so many cross currents to these issues regarding safety, regarding our equity concerns, our feeling and aspiring for a welcoming environment, and yet knowing that public safety and enforcement is just such a very tender subject. So it's really helpful to get it right and make sure we have all considerations at the table. Any other thoughts and questions for today? We won't be strangers to this issue. So, Michelle, thank you so much. And thank you for taking this on. We really have the right person to help and not do it, but to help facilitate it, particularly the communication with us. So that's really, really important.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Any other comments or thoughts? I started this meeting by saying it was not a quiet week for Met Council. I have to acknowledge how exciting it was to be in the room of the Robert Street building and actually seeing people in person, even though we were socially distanced. That was really great, and to be able to sign the full funding agreement, even for big spenders like we are, to sign $1 billion deal is kind of a big deal, and what a vote of confidence for light rail, for us, and for us to move forward. And as the last meeting, as Councilmember Chambliss pointed out, we are now looking toward the advancing this additional transit ways like the Blue Line. So our work will never be done. Yeah. And also now with this Excel investment, people are thinking, wow, the council, what have they got? They keep attracting this great investment. But it's all about the future, and we want to make sure we're positioned for that future in the best way. Anyway, no other business coming before us. It's sunny outside, so hopefully people can enjoy part of the day. And I know I'll see you all soon. So if there's not anything else that anybody else has, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you very soon. Thanks.